Oh, yes. Another episode of Five Rounds here on the Five Reasons Sports Network. And it's a pleasure to be a South Florida-based fight fan this week because a fight very much of local interest has been announced, a grudge match for UFC 272 in March. The 305's own Jorge Masvidal will take on South Florida-based former best friend of his, former training partners, now mortal enemies. Colby Covington will be fighting Jorge Masvidal in March. The fight was just announced this week, and we are very excited. The Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill is excited. They're excited to welcome you for dinner, for lunch, to watch a big game, or to watch a UFC pay-per-view fight. I mean, we're not far away from UFC 270 heavyweight title fight in less than 2 weeks. You can watch that at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill with zero cover charge, no cover charge for any UFC pay-per-view fight at the Quarterdeck. It is a beautiful thing, and it's a beautiful place to be. The seafood is always fresh. I was out there yesterday, and I built my own fresh poke bowl with tuna, avocado, brown rice. It was so freaking good. Find the location nearest to you. Check out their menu before you go. And when you get out there, enjoy those 2-for-1 cocktails because the 2-for-1 happy hour never ends. If you want to visit them on the web, find their location, check their menu. QuarterdeckRestaurants.com is where you go. That's QuarterdeckRestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. So down below, let me introduce Frank Zaffere. Frank, you were actually the person who broke the news to me this week. I didn't realize until I saw you the other day that this fight it's getting done. It's going to happen in less than 2 months. You were the guy that broke that to me. How excited are you for Mr. 305 against Mr. Bad Guy Colby Covington?
I'm super excited, as I'm sure fight fans are, and particularly in Miami, I'm excited. I mean, really, they're both South Florida guys at this point.
Yeah.
You know, with Colby having spent so much time here in Fort Lauderdale, so it's kind of like the 954 versus the 305. But I mean, I think even more than just being excited about the theatrics of what a build-up to this fight's going to be like, I also feel kind of smart because we talked about this. I mean, like, who are these guys going to fight? Like, Colby is just too good as a second-place guy to wipe out contenders for Usman. And Masvidal, how many more can he lose before it's over? He needs a really, really big payday. And I think, you know, a grudge match with Colby, it just makes a ton of sense. I mean, so I just don't understand, and maybe James can shine some light on this, like, why aren't these guys going at each other in the Ultimate Fighter coaches' positions? Why did we miss that part of the activation?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think this was a replacement fight for a headliner.
And that's why, by the way.
Yeah, Volkanovski.
Volkanovski and Holloway. Holloway, I think, was the one who had to pull out.
Yeah, his injury pushed Volkanovski's title defense back a month, I believe, to April, and now he's going to face maybe the Korean Zombie or, you know, another top contender instead. So they can't have that headline, you know, a pay-per-view. So they kind of had this fight in the holster. They knew both guys wanted it really, really bad. It probably would have been an Ultimate Fighter thing, you know, in a fight maybe in May or something like that. But, you know, I guess circumstances, they moved it up. And look, we get it 2 or 3 months sooner than we would have gotten it before. So I can stand not to watch the series to get the fight here faster as opposed to drawing it out. So I can see positives in both scenarios, but I'm not mad. I'm glad it's coming in March, and hey, it's 2 months away.
And by the way, we're not talking about this at this very moment, but I agree with Alex M. I would love to see Volkanovski against Triple C, Henry Cejudo. That would be fantastic. Henry Cejudo is one of my favorite fighters, and I would love to see him go up and challenge for that. But, you know, I was actually really surprised. I was watching Chael Sonnen. You know, his YouTube channel is great, and he did a reaction video to this fight. And surprisingly to me, he's not excited for it. Like, and he couldn't even really articulate why. Like, he's kind of like, I don't know, there's something about this just feels off. He didn't think it was the right fight for Masvidal, which is strange to me because, Frank, and you and I were talking yesterday at the Quarterdeck, I think this is actually a really good fight for Jorge Masvidal. You know, he's got 2 losses to the current champion. So he's not going to get another crack at the welterweight belt anytime soon unless Kamaru Usman were to lose the belt. You could say the same thing about Covington. I mean, Covington's got 2 losses to Kamaru Usman, so he's nowhere close right now to getting another crack at the belt. And so from Jorge Masvidal's standpoint, you know, he is the BMF champ, you know, or he is, you know, the guy who brings in views, and he's the cult of personality. So he needs to be doing fun, fights with grudges, with angles. There's definitely an angle to sell this fight. So I think it makes sense for both guys, for Colby Covington as well, coming off a loss to the champion, fighting a guy like Masvidal, who's highly respected. And by the way, somebody stylistically you should be able to beat, right? I mean, Colby Covington should be able to win this fight. So I think it makes sense for both guys. And it certainly makes sense for us as fight fans because we've wanted to see them settle this beef now for a few years.
Well, when I said it made sense for George Masvidal, I meant that it made sense for his pocketbook, right? For his trajectory as a fighter. But I can understand if Chael Sonnen's point is it doesn't make sense in terms of how you would choose fighters and who deserves what match. I could kind of see his point. Masvidal has lost twice to the champ. So is Colby Covington, but Colby's also won in between there. And then Masvidal spent time fighting like Nate Diaz and just goofing off. And so, Masvidal is fighting above where he should be fighting. I think and the odds have opened up indicating that. I believe the opening odds, Colby is more than a minus 300, maybe a 330. So, that, and I think what he's trying, Alex, I didn't see the comments from Chael, but I think what he's trying to articulate is like styles make fights, and this one doesn't seem to have a style necessarily that's going to make a fight.
That's where I thought he was going to go with it, but he was more talking about the rivalry. Like it was weird because,
that's going to sell. I mean, that's
going to sell, right?
Right.
And it's completely authentic, guys. And we've heard a couple sides of the story. And Frank, you and I, we knew both of these guys back when they were inseparable, right? I mean, we had them both over the years in our studio and best of friends, right? And Masvidal has told the story about, because he made a lot more money before Colby started making money, because Masvidal, his career started to peak when Colby was still kind of fighting for respect, and Colby used to sleep on his couch. I mean, these guys are former roommates and training partners at American Top Team, and I think there was a time when Masvidal was supporting him financially before Colby started making big time money. And then I can remember, and I think this goes back to about 2019, when all of a sudden, we figured out, like you and I kind of pieced it together, that they had a big falling out. And maybe Colby told you why. I didn't know why right away, but I remember, Frank, we were interviewing Colby a few years ago, and I asked him something about Masvidal, and he was just like, oh, no, I haven't talked to him. And it was kind of awkward. Like, I didn't know what happened. Then you told me they had a falling out. So Colby's side of the story is basically Colby saying, hey, Masvidal used to be the bigger star. I started to get really famous and I started to get big fights and opportunities, and he got really jealous, and the friendship could not survive his jealousy. That's Colby's side of it. Masvidal's side of the falling out, Frank, is far more detailed, far more specific. So according to George Masvidal, and the timeline checks out because this goes back a few years, Colby was training for his fight against Rafael dos Anjos. And according to Masvidal, Colby Covington stiffed his boxing coach. Didn't pay one of his coaches for the training that he put in. I think I have an idea who that coach likely was. And, it's a guy that I know a little bit, and I'm sorry if this happened to him. But yeah, this is something that Colby denies, but Jorge Masvidal claims, and they have, of course, coaches in common and friends in common. Masvidal was really pissed off about Colby Covington not paying this guy for the training that he should have been paid for, and that's the reason for the falling out. I don't know, Frank, if you have any more insight on it. And usually when you get two sides to a story, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I don't have any more insight on that, but the one thing that I can tell you that is, the gorilla in the room about this whole thing is something that I think Dan Lambert of American Top Team hugely mismanaged at the time. Colby Covington had one fight left on a contract where he had, I think, won 5 or 6 and lost 1 in a run in the UFC. The last fight on his deal was Damian Maia in Brazil. And Dan Lambert got the call from the UFC from Sean Shelby. He said, hey, we're not re-signing your guy. Can't do anything with him. He's no bueno. And, Dan told Colby, like, this is it. There's 2 sides to fighting, and you're not delivering on the side that really motivates a league like the UFC to want to market you. And so he went on that, Brazilians are filthy animals tirade. He alienated a lot of people in the gym at American Top Team when he did that. he also simultaneously saved his career and propelled himself into superstardom. And the reason I mentioned Dan Lambert is Dan Lambert's the wrestling guy. Dan Lambert's the guy that coaches these guys on making sure that they are following that kind of trajectory and making sure that they understand all of the dimensions of the fight game. I thought at that moment he could have pulled everybody together a little bit and said, listen, I told him this is the way to spin this. Obviously Colby doesn't think you're a filthy animal. Anyone who's ever been around him knows what a nice guy he is. But that whole thing splintered and everything went sideways. And I think Colby's almost like an undercover agent. He's not that guy, but he's been playing that character so long. I think he's kind of lost himself in the character.
It's true. And then you get to a point and he's got like too much pride to try to backtrack from it. Like, and also it's too late. Like if he were to come out tomorrow and issue like an Instagram apology, like, guys, I just got carried away. This is not who I am. I didn't mean to pick on anybody. Like everyone would say, go fuck yourself. Right. Like all the people that he's insulted over the years, including an entire country, because all down Brazil, which is one of the bigger countries in the Western Hemisphere, people despise this guy. It's like it's too late to apologize at this point. So he realizes he's made his bed. He's got to sleep. He's got to sleep in it. There's nothing he can do. I mean, what about you, James, on this fight? Does the feud, does that do something for you, or are you like Chael Sonnen where you're not feeling it? How do you feel about this fight? The
storyline is as good a storyline as you can have in MMA. It's as organic a storyline. It's as natural and genuine, and it's as intense. So I can't see. I mean, look, we've been talking about training tapes with Cyril Gane and Francis Ngannou, sparring tape storylines and things like that. This is something that's organic. This is something that the UFC doesn't have to take a 10-second snippet from a training camp of two guys, sparring and make it a big thing. They have all the ingredients here, that they need. And you just get the sense that had these two seen each other away from the UFC, just at a bar or on the street or something like that, they probably would be fighting out on the street. So it's this is as good as a storyline as there is. And also, just to add one more point, the timing of this is perfect. I don't know what Chael Sonnen is talking about. They both kind of need each other right now. They're both big stars. They're both headliners at a pay-per-view. They're both going to bring in numbers, but there's really no one else for them to fight other than to try to get closer to a title shot. So for Masvidal, if he beats Colby, he's going to be number one or number two because Colby's the number one contender, right, or at least at the top right now. So he's going to be back at the top. Has to wait for Usman to lose. Same thing with Colby. If he wins the fight, it doesn't really do much for his ranking, but it keeps him right there at the top. So whenever Usman loses, they'll be close up, right there next in line waiting. So I think it's great.
I have to jump in on this one point. I really like George Masvidal. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times.
Yep.
He's a really great guy. So what I'm about to say, I hope isn't construed as me throwing shade at legendary street fighter George Masvidal. But, there's a lot of talk about Colby not really being himself, right? Playing a character, right?
Yeah.
Well, I seem to remember a George Masvidal who would come to our studio, usually in tow with Yoel Romero. And, George dressed incredibly down. I mean, he just kind of dressed like he didn't care about anything. Baseball cap, low key. You'd never know he was anybody, right? And suddenly he's got the big mane of hair. He's wearing the Scarface suits, and this man has adopted an 80s drug trafficking persona look that is unmistakable, right? I mean, that's who he is.
He's Tony Montana now.
He's Tony flipping Montana now. So, like, who's not being real? I mean, it's like, look, they're both cashing in on ways in which they can express themselves in methods that make them the most attractive to the fan bases.
Right.
And the difference, though, I think, is that if I got Colby on our show right now, or maybe not on our show, he'd never break character. But if I just had him with us talking, he'd admit to he's a pretty nice guy. He's pretty laid back.
Oh, Frank, I think I may have told the story.
George is living this thing, man.
Oh, he is.
Like, he'd end up swinging at us if we tried to convince him that he was anything but the baddest man on the planet, Tony Montana.
No, and I told the story I think once on this show, and Frank, you were there for this when we went to that UFC event a few years ago at FLA Live Arena, what it's called now, where the Panthers play, and Colby Covington wasn't fighting that night, but he was there appearing. He attended the fights. We got to spend a little bit of time with him outside the arena afterwards, and we both took photos with him. And I remember when I was taking a photo with Colby, like he was just, dressed normal street clothes. We were about to take a picture, and then he had this backpack with him, and we're about to take the picture. He goes, "Oh, wait, hold on." He goes, "Do you want me to get into the full gimmick?" And I'm like, "Sure." And so he opens up the backpack. He pulls out his MAGA hat and his replica UFC title belt. Because remember, his gimmick back then was he just, and Chael Sonnen did this years ago, so it's not even that original. But Colby, who was not a champion, would just wear a fake title. Like he would bring a fake UFC title belt with him, like to say I'm the real champ or whatever. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's a gimmick. When the guy says to me, "Oh, you want me to do the full gimmick for the picture?" I'm like, "Sure, why not?" He pulls a MAGA hat and a UFC title belt out of the bag. So that just goes to show you the way that he lives his life. Like he is embracing a character.
He also has a tendency to just say whatever is on his mind without regard necessarily for how it's being received, which I could also see, but a lot of these fighters are like this. I think that Colby is a lot like our show favorite JP Reese in that regard. I can remember really feeling like my James and my workouts were hitting next level a few years ago. I thought, man, I'm looking good. And I'm out with JP, and I said, I'm bulking up, bro. I'm ready. He goes, "I think you look like shit. You look fat." And I'm like, what? I mean, that's not, how can you just say that like that? He goes, "Well, I could say it like that because you look like shit and you look fat. And I don't think you could catch me if your life depended on it." So it was like, they just don't have a problem saying certain things. Colby definitely has that issue for sure.
Yeah. All right. So we talked about how Colby's a big favorite. You were really close, Frank, on the odds you threw out there. Minus 325 is how Colby opened. Masvidal, the underdog, at plus 275. What would be Masvidal's path to victory here? I think that, guys, his path to victory is also his greatest weakness in this fight. If he shows up, Masvidal, he's more of the loose cannon, I think, between these two guys. He's the one who's probably more likely to show up and fight with emotion and really start swinging for the fences, which could get him in trouble and get him taken down, right? If he starts really loading up on his punches and kicks, that's when Colby can catch him in a takedown and just grind him out, right? But then at the same time, that may be the X factor that could bring Masvidal victory here, because I think the most likely way for Masvidal to win this fight would be to really hurt Colby on the feet and catch him with one of those unpredictable, unconventional type of strikes that he throws, whether it's a knee or a looping punch. So that's kind of the way that I see it for Masvidal. Yeah, I probably give him more than a puncher's chance, because Masvidal, I remember years ago, he didn't have good cardio. His cardio has gotten better over the last few years. Colby could still wear him out and drain his cardio, but Masvidal is going to be dangerous. Like if this fight goes into the quote unquote championship rounds, the main event rounds, anytime he's on his feet, even if Colby has been grinding him for 3 rounds, you get to the 4th round, the 5th round, Masvidal can still be very dangerous to make something happen. So that's probably his path to victory, is to really catch Colby with something. Whereas Colby, as it is in a lot of fights, Frank, and Colby likes to test out his boxing. So I'm not saying he's just going to be going for takedowns constantly, but I do think his wrestling prowess could be the difference here.
Yeah, I would have said that George has a better than a puncher's shot, in this fight, except that I've seen Colby now take some horrific shots from Kamaru Usman and recover pretty admirably in the second fight specifically. I'm thinking about, where I think most people would have been finished. I just feel like that trip hammer jab with that unusual, southpaw stance for a right lead wrestler, and what he's going to be, the speed and the relentlessness with which he'll be able to maintain that. I think this fight is going to look very much like the fight with Robbie Lawler. Another guy with frightening strength and power in his punches, who just never could put anything together. And if he did clip him a little bit, Colby's going to eat 3, 4, 5 of those. You're going to have to hit him with a lot more than that. He's not going to fall into the Ben Askren trap. Colby isn't. So I think it's going to look just a lot like Robbie Lawler. I think, that fight was up in Newark, and I remember it pretty well. And
did you go to that one?
I did. I went.
thought
That was the
Yeah.
one that Trump's went to, and I was lied to. I said I was going to be with them, but apparently I was just in the arena near them. But I wasn't actually.
So you so you were told you were going to be like sitting next to one of Trump's kids.
Yeah,
Instead, you were in the same arena among 20,000 other people.
Well, I mean, I was in the friends and family section. I don't want to throw shade on Colby, but he did kind of make it seem like I'd be there with the Trumps, and I wasn't. There was a barricade, and I could see beyond that barricade. That's where the ballers were. But yeah, that's my prediction for the fight. Robbie Lawler 2019. That's what it's going to look like.
Yeah, all very good points. And, just to agree with you guys, I really only see one method to victory for Masvidal, and that's to make it an ugly, brawling fight. Which would
be the most fun fight. Like, that would be the most entertaining fight they could do.
Yeah, if he can get, Colby sort of out of character and fighting, heavily on emotion as well. And then they just stand in the pocket and just throw at each other, and Masvidal ends up catching him first. That's really the only way I can see him. I can't see him outpointing Colby for five rounds. But yeah, it's Colby has more ways to victory. But I just think the storyline and everything together just makes it a good fight, despite the odds, despite most people expecting Colby to win. I think just with all the anger and the emotion involved, I think that kind of adds to Masvidal's chances of bringing his best. And that's the thing. If Masvidal brings his best, has his best cardio, has his best training, comes in his best shape, he could be a tough out for anybody. So I think that's pretty much how it's going to play out.
So is this main event, is this worth the extra $5 for on pay-per-view that they're charging now? I'm still really upset about that. And we mentioned it in the last show. We didn't talk about it a whole lot, but I mean, it's really frustrating with, the UFC last year had financially, statistically on paper, their most profitable year ever. Like, they just had their best year ever. So they're gouging us. Like, they are taking advantage of the fact that, okay, they know a lot of people pirate their fights. Like, it's the worst kept secret. I don't pirate their fights. And the primary reason why I don't pirate them is I have such a low computer IQ that I'm not confident in my ability to pirate a UFC fight without plaguing my computer with viruses, because I've done that before. And times that I've tried to do it, like for boxing fights and stuff, I'll lose the goddamn stream every 5 minutes and I'm looking for a new one. So it's too much of a headache for me. So I pay for the fights. And there are enough of us, the late 30-somethings, 40-something, 50-somethings, or just people who are too dumb to figure out how to steal these things and stream them for free. And, hardcores like us are paying, what was $65 on ESPN, then $70, and now they're raising it to 75. So it's like they know a bunch of people are pirating them, Frank. And so now it's like, oh, well, we're losing money on the pirates, so let's raise the price for the honest people to make up the difference.
Well, I mean, that's how business works, right? That's why credit card rates are where they are, because there's a certain number of people that don't pay their credit card bills, and that's factored into the price.
The medical bills, same thing.
That's
a lot of
why
people don't pay medical
sucks
bills
now, because everyone gets coverage, and they can't factor your likelihood of needing, a lot of care, and so now we all pay for that. Everybody pays, but listen, remember, there's something called elasticity in pricing. So how much can I get for a cheeseburger? How much can the UFC get for a pay-per-view? They're going to find out. They owe it to their shareholders to find out just how much they can make. And I think they're going to, Alex M just said $100 is his limit.
That's high, man.
Yeah,
Good
you might
you,
say,
Alex.
but I think he's on to something. I'm not quite sure where it is. In menus, $19.99 looks fine, but 21 looks outrageous. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's like a weird number there, and I think he might be onto it. I think they're going to probably be able to nickel dime up to $95, $99, and then you go over that, and I think psychologically that might be where they run into a wall temporarily. But I mean, look, this is what you do, man. They've got a great product. You want to see how much you can get for it.
So, Frank, people talk about, and James, people talk about the need for fighters to unionize. Should the fans unionize and say, you know what, I've had enough? Like,
you do it every time you order. I mean, you don't have to. You don't have.
That's
to
what I'm
organize
saying. Like we like but the fans. Hold on, but we need to communicate. We need to say, guys, we are, until they lower the price back down to where it was before, we're just not going to pay for this anymore. That we're not going to pay $74.99 if all of us come to. I'm going to start this union. I'm going to unionize the UFC fans if we all come to an agreement where we are not going to pay $74.99, then they sell 0 pay-per-views for Ngannou versus Gane, and then we win, right? Like, they're going to have to lower the price.
Yeah, I'm already at the point to where I've decided I'm going to be more selective this year. And
yes,
so
thank you.
I mean, look, I usually order every pay-per-view that comes, but now, the price is getting up there, and it's just a $5 change, but still, as Frank said, they're going to keep going up. So I'm gonna start being selective. If I don't like the fight, if I don't like the main event or the card, then I'm gonna sit it out. So
there's something else too, James, that I think might be at foot here. And you're like, the UFC's sophistication, I'm sure, in market analysis is way beyond what I could comprehend. But I'm thinking also that they might be contemplating, like, look, let's get the price where you can't get the Jake Paul fight too. Or you can't get, maybe, the boxing match that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head that's coming up, because the UFC is a known quantity. They know that their customers and even people who are casual fans know that, usually top to bottom, that's going to be an entertaining buy. That's more of a money's worth than traditional pay-per-views have been over the years. So they might be thinking, like, this is a great way to freeze everybody else out because,
right.
If you drop $75 or $80 on this, the Jake Paul fad might just go away.
Or if nothing else, maybe if you drop $75 on this, you're going to be looking for one of those illegal streams for the other thing, and then that's their problem, right? I mean,
right, and then James, Alex, and I have talked in the past about why can't we just get away from the pay-per-view model?
Yeah,
I guess there's. I'd love to hear you guys' opinion, but I guess for me, on the one hand, it's not mainstream enough. So, you can't sell it the way the SEC just sold their rights to ESPN, like there's just not enough, traditional advertisers that would want to be associated with it, maybe. And then I also think there's just this lingering perception that when you're talking about watching a fight, if it's not pay-per-view, it's not really as badass as it could be.
That's real. Like that is a real thing because people, like, I have conversations with casual fans because, over the years, the UFC, they did a bunch of shows on Fox during the Fox deal. Then they've had a couple shows on ABC, a lot of shows on ESPN. And every now and then, like, you get really good fights. But people are like, oh, it's not a pay-per-view, it's probably crap. Like, they don't take it seriously. Right. You've got a heavyweight title fight coming up between Ngannou and Gane, and it's $75, and this is, a huge belt on the line. You feel like, okay, this is worth something, and it's on pay-per-view. People downplay the fights that aren't.
Yeah, no, I think those are all good points for sure. But I think this also puts a little more pressure on the UFC to make sure their matchmaking is on point, as well. And I think that's why you always have these interim situations when they have to fill in and put a title in the main event or something like that. And now, over the last year and a half or so, you're starting to see good fights being moved up to 5-rounders, whether it's Nate Diaz, Leon Edwards in a co-main event, or like we have now with Masvidal and Colby, where there's no title on the line, but they're making it 5 rounds. So, they've put some pressure on themselves as well to kind of live up to the price increase and delivering these pay-per-views.
You're right, James, and for them, it used to be, look, we've got to do these. We got to make these fights because people are reporting our numbers and we want to look like we're growing and everything. But now it's about re-signing with ESPN, right?
Right, because I don't think the UFC doesn't really make a commission off these anymore. ESPN pays them a flat rate. So they want to look good they want to make more money for ESPN, I guess.
I mean, how bad a look would it be if they went backwards with ESPN or ended up back with a different, so like they're really going to be driving. And I think we're going to benefit over the course of this relationship with ESPN, better fights. I can remember before the ESPN deal, there were some pay-per-views where I was like, how could they even put this on? And I feel like they did that because it was just their money and that was it. But now, having to impress a major outlet like ESPN, I think we benefit from that.
And by the way, I want to let people know in the next couple minutes, we're expected to be joined by our pal, Dean Thomas. There's a couple things I want to get to with Dean. Number one, Dean spent many years coaching and training and fighting out of American Top Team. I'd love to hear his perspective on the feud between two guys he's trained together with before in Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal. In fact, the aforementioned Dean Thomas is with us now. Dean, what's going on, man? Good evening. How are you?
Man, what's up, man? The lineup is different. I see Frank on the bottom now, James on the top. This is different, man. What's going on? Why y'all shift around?
Hold on.
I got demoted.
Do I want to make you more comfortable here? Hold on. I can move.
There we go.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's all right.
We roll out the red carpet for Dean Thomas. Now, Dean, we want to try to organize Frank's training, but before we get to that, you spent so many years fighting out of and coaching at American Top Team. Is there any sort of insight, without betraying anybody's confidence, any insight you can give us on the feud between Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal? Like, was it really sudden? Because these guys, they used to be joint at the hip, best buds, training partners. Eventually, Colby had to leave, and he does training out of MMA Masters now. Like, what was it like in the gym when these guys had a fallout? How evident was it, and did it divide the gym at all?
It didn't really divide the gym. Fighters are a weird breed, and they don't always pick sides like that. Like, fighters and it's because they're so selfish. They're so like, well, they're not friends, but you know what? I still got to get mine. So it didn't really divide the gym. But you're right. They were inseparable. They would always be together. When they were close, they were really close. They trained together. They shared partners. They shared coaches. So, everything was together. But what happened was, and this is according to rumor, obviously, was Covington didn't pay one of the coaches that Masvidal provided for him. And I don't know if it was he didn't pay him at all or he didn't pay him all the money, but apparently he owed one of the coaches some money. And, Masvidal being a loyal friend that he is to his people, he's one of the type of guys who is different from a fighter in terms of, I'm not going to be selfish towards the people helping me. So he sided with the coach, and that's when the falling out happened, when Colby didn't pay his coach. So there was beefing from that point on, and then it got uncomfortable.
Dean, how much did that whole the Brazilian people are filthy thing that went down when Colby fought Damian Maia, how much of that caused any or all of this rift that we hear about now?
Well, for a lot of guys, it was a big thing. Like, I remember, and this was like right when it happened. I remember when it happened, a lot of guys were like, man, how they going to do me like that? How they going to do me like that? But again, that selfishness of a fighter, after about a week, they were like, man, Colby could wrestle. I need that. You know what I'm saying?
So that's a great.
I know what he said, but he can wrestle, and I need that. So like, it didn't last that long. Like they got over that quick.
So I was talking earlier, just to follow up on that point. Could Dan Lambert have done more to like maybe put that fire out a little bit? Because I felt, from what I've read, it seemed like Dan was instrumental in helping Colby find a way to maybe make himself relevant in the UFC. I'm not saying that Dan said he should say horrible things about Brazilians. I'm just saying help him with the heel routine that he was going to go on. And I just always wondered, like, couldn't have Dan have been more helpful, like kind of corralling everybody and saying, look, I'm coaching this guy to be an ass so he can stay in the league.
Well, Dan, he kind of stays out of it on certain things, so he'll help anybody individually. Like if you came to him and said, hey man, I need help. I need $5,000. I'm in trouble. Boom. No problem. Any individual needs help, but he doesn't really get involved in like the team stuff unless it's like a really, really, really big deal. And he just kind of lets things work themselves out. And this was a situation where he just kind of let it work out until it was that bad where Colby couldn't even come in a gym without somebody wanting to fight him. And like, that's to the point it got between Dustin Poirier, Masvidal, some of the Brazilians probably never got over what he said. And then at that point, Dan was probably like, oh man, this is getting a little too hairy. So, and you're losing partners, but Dan rarely ever got involved in like the team business of things. But he was very instrumental in helping guys individually.
Dean, I'm sure during this build-up the next 2 months, everyone's going to focus on the fallout. But I'm curious because you were there. How was the beginning? How did they become friends? What was their friendship like? Do they have similar personalities? Do they have things in common? Like, what was the beginning like as they were building their friendship?
So I cracked this code today on my show today on Sirius. I cracked the code because it's a weird relationship for, Colby. He's like he's from like Oregon or wherever he's from, and Masvidal's from Miami. Like, you couldn't get two different type of guys, right? Like different parts of the country, different mindsets, probably joined together at some level by their political views. And I think that came later. And I cracked this code. This is what they had in common. At this point, when Masvidal started wanting to wrestle, Colby was available. This is when Colby was kind of recruited to the team when Masvidal fell in love with wrestling. There was a time, because Masvidal had always been more of a boxer. He fell in love with wrestling, the grit of wrestling, and Colby provided that for him. What Masvidal provided for Colby was clout. And that's what happened. They traded essentially wrestling for clout. And that was the relationship that they had. And I promise, like, I cracked that code today. Like, that's just my theory. I cracked that today. But looking back, that's what it came down to. Masvidal was in love with wrestling. He was going to do camps in all these different places. And I think that's what he got mostly from Colby. And Colby was trying to build a name for himself. And Masvidal was that guy who had the star power. He had the gift of gab. He might not have been a star yet, but he had the potential. He always had the potential. And I think Colby saw that early.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, trading wrestling for clout. And let me ask you, because the opening odds for the fight heavily favors Colby, which doesn't surprise any of us. He's about a minus 325 favorite. Masvidal, the underdog, at plus 275. What in your mind, Dean, what has to happen for Masvidal to win this fight? What does he have to do to pull off the upset?
Well, one, so, Colby's a very good fighter. He's a very smart fighter. The way he fought Usman is different than the way he should fight Colby or fight Masvidal. If he tries to fight Masvidal the way he fought Usman, he gets beat. He can't fight that type of fight. He has to go back to his volume style, using movement angles, rest takedowns, just being loose and mixing it up and being the athletic kid that he fights like. He fights like a very athletic kid. But if he tries to stand there and trade with Masvidal, he's going to get beat for sure. But I think this really comes down to the training that they had before. And whatever, and I know this because we brought Masvidal in camp with us for Tyron when he was training for Colby. And Masvidal was like, oh, man, I know all his tendencies. I know what he does. I used to catch him with this. I used to catch him with that. So he has to be able to remember those things and bring those out. Now, however, early in the fight, it's going to be a different fight because, Colby's training with a different camp now. So he's going to be a different fighter some way. But Masvidal has to try to bring him back to that old Colby that he probably had a lot of success with in the gym. And I'm sure he had a lot of success with Colby. But, I don't like the odds. I really don't like the odds. I think the odds should be closer because of the history they have. I mean, it's almost kind of like when you think of, two teams like Georgia and Georgia State, right? Let's say Georgia's the best team in the country.
I can tell you're not a big college football fan, but yeah.
But Georgia State would give them problems because of the rivalry. And I think that's very similar in this case. Is it like Colby on paper looks like he should be able to dominate. But I think because of the rivalry and the history that they have together, this fight should be a lot closer than what the numbers suggest.
Dean, I had said earlier before you got on that I feel like this might just look like Robbie Lawler, Colby Covington from a couple years ago. You see that playing out, that potential at all? Because, I know that they're different fighters, but Robbie, dangerous striker, looking to load up, looking to, put Colby out. And Colby just kind of got on his bike and worked him with that jab viciously for 5 rounds.
Well, I mean, if Colby wants to win this fight, it has to look like that. That's the only way he does win this fight. it can't look any different than that. And that's why I think that he's going to fight that way, because he can potentially do that. He's got to frustrate Masvidal. He's got to, and that's the one thing he didn't do with Robbie. He was just better than Robbie. You know, Robbie just quicker. He was quicker than Robbie, which is why it looks so lopsided. But with Masvidal, he's not going to be quicker than Masvidal. So he's got to frustrate Masvidal with the movement and get Masvidal to start making mistakes and start chasing him a little bit. But if Colby wants to win this fight convincingly, he has to fight him that way.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, if he slows down and it comes back and it comes down to a trading of skills, Masvidal wins that battle.
We're joined here by 9-time UFC veteran, awesome coach, radio star, reality TV star, podcast star. Dean Thomas is with us here on 5 Rounds. Dean, within the next couple of weeks at your convenience, I want the 4 of us to grab lunch. We'll stick Frank with the bill, as we usually do. But I want the 4 of us to grab lunch because we have to plan. Actually, you know what? Maybe I'll buy because we're going to put Frank's body through hell. We need to organize Frank's MMA training and an exhibition bout. And I think Dean Thomas is the guy who can help us do this. We've been talking about doing this for years, and I think this is the right platform to do it because we actually have a visual component, right? I mean, Frank and I and James and Frank and I, we used to do radio together. Now that we actually have a visual component, people can actually watch Frank getting his ass beat. Dean, are you up to the task? Do you think you can take on a pupil like Frank Zaffere?
Well, here's what I think. Frank, how much do you weigh?
Today, about 193.
For real? Who's the opponent that you want to fight?
Well, I mean, by the way, that's my walking around the restaurant weight. I mean, I'm sure I can cut down.
I'm not judging you, Tubby.
So, who do I want to fight?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not looking for a big name here, Dean. This is a foray into the unknown for me. So I'm just looking for something manageable, but still interesting for the fans.
Well, I'm thinking that, we get you a fight sometime. We plan it around one of the bare knuckle events, and we get one of the losers from a bare knuckle event to fight you.
Okay.
I like that, actually.
Yeah, I like that.
Especially because, we've talked to some of the bare knuckle fighters before, and they're super nice, but they're a little bit crazier than the regular.
They're super nice. They're super nice and naive. And they don't really they don't value life the way like normal people do. So it's perfect.
Dean, it's funny. It's funny you called me Tubby. I was telling a story earlier on the show that a couple years ago I was having lunch with JP Reese, and I felt like my workouts were going really well, and I told him so. And he goes, "I think you look like shit. You look fat." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I don't look fat," because you don't know what in shape means. So that's what I'm most excited about, is finding out what professional MMA, what's that shape look like? Because apparently it's not this.
Well, here's what we're going to do, and this is good for me too, because while I'm joking on you about your weight, I weigh about the same, so we can lose some weight together. We and you can train together, and we can get this done together. Because I need to get in shape. Because I always pride myself in being ready for the street. Somebody just talked about Jason Derulo. Jason Derulo might run up on me one day, and I can't get embarrassed by a pop star. So I need to make sure I'm in shape too.
I feel like they made a movie like this once, right? Apollo Creed and Rocky Balboa. I feel we could get out on the beach and race. I got the shorts. I hope you got your shorts ready. I can't swim.
We've got to make that video. By the way, we have to make that video of Frank and Dean running on the beach. We can lock that in. We're doing that for sure.
I hope you got insurance. I'm tearing the ACL quick. I know that.
And you know what? I already know, guys, because we need to get an actual videographer, because if it's like me with my iPhone, I'm going to screw something up. And we know our guy, Elliot Brownstein. He's a photog and a videographer. We'll sign him up. I'm sure he'd come out and film some of this. So we got to get this done. And Dean, you're up, I'm in Dade. These two guys are in Broward. You're up in like Palm Beach or even north of that, right? We will find a spot near somewhere that's convenient for you. We'll work this out.
Let's hit the dive bar together.
Yeah, I'm all down for that. I'm in Port St. Lucie, but I got spots in Palm Beach. So it's all good, man. Don't worry, we'll make it happen, man. I got love everywhere.
All right, brother.
Yeah.
But make sure, if y'all haven't checked it, speaking of football, make sure y'all watch the latest episode of Dana White Looking for a Fight. where I was able to field a punt from the punter of the Denver Broncos.
That's not easy, bro.
Wow.
That's not easy. I've tried to do that before, and I've looked like a buffoon. So I know that's not easy.
Trust me, I know it wasn't easy. In fact, somebody put it like this: I didn't catch the ball caught me. I wasn't even looking at it. It just kind of fell, and I caught it with my knees.
Hey man, you caught it. That's awesome. I mean,
Yeah, man. So
you're an athlete.
but check that. But make sure y'all check that. That's on YouTube. It just came out I think yesterday.
That's
so
awesome.
make sure y'all check that out.
Well, Dean, thank you so much, man. And if there's anything else you want to plug, because you do so many things, like you mentioned your Sirius XM show, you do a show, ESPN West Palm. Like, well, where can people find all your stuff?
Well, and it's another thing that just came out. If you have UFC Fight Pass, make sure y'all watch the first UFC comedy show with Adam Hunter, myself,
I like him,
Henry Cejudo, and Chael Sonnen. We all get up on stage and we perform our stand-up routine. So if you haven't seen it, make sure y'all check that.
That is a hot tip. Dean Thomas, thank you so much, man. Enjoy your weekend coming up. You working this weekend or you're off till the next one?
I'm off this weekend, but I will be in Anaheim working in Ghana and Gone.
I figured. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's going to be great. Enjoy that. And I'm sure sometime after that fight, we'll talk to you again.
All right, fellas. Love it. I'll catch you guys. Peace.
Dude.
For you.
Awesome, man. He brings it. And he seems like he's it. Like I'm already like Frank, I'm so glad you brought up the whole running on the beach thing because we have to do that. I know exactly who's going to be the videographer for this. This is going to be so cool. So let's look for, I mean, James, you know, and Frank doesn't give himself a whole lot of credit. You know, he's not fat. Like he's in really good shape for a man his age. Do you think he can pull this off at a reasonable level? Because I do.
Man, well,
Thanks,
well, you sound motivated, so that's half of it. You know, especially at this age, it's just the motivation part. But I don't know, Frank. I gotta see, man. I gotta see how you see your early training and see how things are coming along.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be candid with you guys. I mean, I have an athletic background, but I am 51 and I am coming off 2 back surgeries. So I think that probably has me the most, I know I'm fully recovered, but I think psychologically, just being, comfortable doing certain things on the sides that got, repaired. But like, that's what I love about Dean. At least I can trust Dean. He's not gonna be a mutant about it and just, try to break me. Although, who knows? All depends on how well we treat him at the dive bar.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll try to plan that super secret lunch meeting, and we'll get through that. Go from there.
Not to sound like like super serious media guy or anything, but I mean, we talk about this all the time. We live it, we love it, and like it's really important if you have the opportunity. Kind of like Plimpton when he wrote Paper Lion, if you have the opportunity to experience it at any level, then we owe it to ourselves to do it just so that we can be more informed about what we're talking about. And it's a very interesting sport in that way, in that there can be little ways for you to experience it where you can't, I can't go experience being a defensive back for the Miami Dolphins. You know what I mean? Like that's not going to happen. But they have ways for this to happen that I think I think the fans are going to find it very entertaining, especially because I'm probably going to get banged up pretty well.
That's what I'm looking forward to. Let's hope you don't break a hip or something out there. All right, fellas, let's get into a new episode of The Toss-Up. What will we be discussing today?
I'm not ready. Oh, my God. Hold on a second.
I love my favorite thing about throwing to The Toss-Up is I try to catch Frank off guard. Like, he doesn't realize this. I can kind of read his body language and know he's not ready for this, so let me throw to it.
All right. Will John Jones ever win the UFC heavyweight title?
Yeah, and I brought this up because did you guys see the recent comments from Daniel Cormier, who's a former 2-time loser against John Jones, also a former heavyweight and light heavyweight champion, but he said he doesn't think Jones is ever going to win that belt. I think Jones can and will. Now, the biggest obstacle, James, is just going to be the quality of opponent he's going to have to face. Because I do think even though the UFC's heavyweight division, it's not super deep. It's never really been super deep. It's always shallow compared to the lighter weight classes. But I do think that you look at guys at the top, like Francis Ngannou and Ciryl Gane, they are both absolutely world class. I also really like Derek Lewis, but I think John Jones could certainly beat Derek Lewis. But the top two guys would be tougher for him, both difficult matchups stylistically because of Ngannou's power and takedown defense that he's developed, and Ciryl Gane's just pure class and length. Jones, of course, very, very long, former light heavyweight who had like a 10-inch reach advantage on everyone he fought. But the thing is, like, not only is John Jones just so incredibly gifted. I mean, Daniel Cormier seems to have forgotten about the couple of times that Jones defeated him soundly. And also, I think Jones at light heavyweight ran out of motivation. When you start cycling through the same opponents and you've been champion for so long, I think you start going through the motions. I think now that Jones has taken time away from the sport competitively, he's taken the time to build up his body. And from what I understand, he's gaining weight the right way. This isn't something that he rushed into. I'm sure he's working with nutritionists, so he's going to put on quality muscle and quality mass, to not lose too much of his speed at heavyweight. He's the best fighter, I think, pound for pound ever, right? I'm going to give him that. I think John Jones is the greatest MMA fighter of all time, and he's still relatively young. So why not? I think John Jones can and will win the UFC heavyweight title. What do you think?
Interesting. I disagree because of circumstances. I think he only gets one shot, and I think he's going to lose that shot, especially if it's against Francis Ngannou. Ciryl Gane, it could be an interesting style fight. I think he would have a better shot. But I think he's only going to do this once if he loses, and I think he does lose. And I can't see him saying, well, okay, I'm going to fight 2 or 3 more times at heavyweight and work my way back up to another title shot. I think if he loses, he goes back down to light heavy or retires and, either dominates or just say, hey, I gave it a shot and didn't work out. So not that he couldn't. Now, that's a different answer. He obviously could. He's capable if he dedicates himself and he's willing to, take more than one shot at this. I think he could, but I think he's only going to get one shot at this, possibly this summer. I think he's going to lose it, especially if it's against Francis, and I don't think he wins the title. I think that's it for him.
It's funny. I agree with you, James, but in a different way. I feel like Ngannou's the one guy John Jones could beat of the 3 I'm thinking of that would stand in his way.
Oh, Stipe as well.
Stipe Miocic, I think. Yeah. If he opens with him, which I think is a bigger possibility than people are giving it credit for, I think if he opens with him, I think his heavyweight career is over right after that fight. I think Stipe outclasses him. He's too athletic, too big and strong. Ditto for Ciryl Gane, who won't fall for some of the John Jones tricks, right? He's super athletic. He'll play the range game too, and John Jones won't be able to solve that riddle. And again, you're dealing with a guy who's that big and that athletic. And then Ngannou, who I think can beat Ciryl Gane and has beaten Stipe, I just feel like John Jones would have the best shot with him just because I think Ngannou could get emotionally frustrated. A couple front kicks to his knee, and I see him going like, I'm going to rip your head off, and playing into a cerebral fighter like John Jones and his ability to capitalize on that. But having said that, I don't think he survives. I don't think he walks right to a title. I think it's Stipe or the loser of Gane and Ngannou, and I think that might be Gane. And so I'm with James in that I think it lasts one fight, whoever he opens up with, whichever one of those 2 he opens up against.
Yeah, and to be fair, let me read the quote from DC because I referenced it, didn't give it a whole lot of context. This was on his show, DC and RC with Ryan Clark. He said, I believe that John Jones will fight at heavyweight, and he'll fight for the belt, but he'll lose to Ciryl Gane or Francis Ngannou, he said. And I just think that the time away with the weight difference and those guys being who they are, that's the problem, he said. It's not that John Jones has gotten worse. It's just that these guys are a different level of heavyweight. I agree with that partially. He's looking at the time away as a curse. I look at it as a blessing because I think for him to move up to heavyweight, this is something he couldn't rush into. I think taking time away was the right way to do it. And I know not all that was his choice because he's gotten in some trouble, but it is what it is. I just hope for Jones's sake that he's been focused on training during all this time away. But I do agree with the part that the two guys at the top and three, because Frank was right to include Stipe, are really, really tough. And we haven't always had fighters of that quality at the top of the heavyweight division. There have been some good years and some lean years, throughout UFC history. So, yeah, that I agree with. If he gets a title shot against any of those three men, it's not going to be easy.
I also don't think John Jones could have beaten Daniel Cormier years ago in the heavyweight division.
See, I don't know about that.
I don't think so. I think that the physically
Cormier was better
out,
at heavyweight. He was better at heavyweight. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason why.
Faster. Yeah,
there's a reason why Jones didn't fight Cormier at heavyweight when he probably could have. He didn't want to give him that advantage, give him that strength and weight advantage. So it's possible. I mean, we'll never know. But I mean,
one of my favorite fights ever was Cormier against Josh Barnett. You remember that in Strikeforce? He ragdolled him. Like he slammed him like on his head like 2 or 3 times in that fight. That was incredible.
Cormier's got that man strength, that like farm guy strength. You know what I mean? Like he's just got that gift, But you make him cut all that weight, and as James points out, he's given a huge handicap. Jake Paul is being courted by PFL, and Bellator is also interested. Is this a PR stunt? Will we really see this goofball sign with an MMA organization?
Yeah, I got to think this is a PR stunt. From his point of view, like if I'm PFL or Bellator, yeah, obviously I'd love to sign this guy because he's going to bring so many more eyes to your promotion, right? And we all love PFL. Like we've been to PFL events before. Great people run that organization, and they've got some great fighters. Don't get me wrong, but they don't have the sort of mainstream appeal where they can compete with the UFC or even Bellator right now. It's a growing organization. Yeah, if they had an opportunity to actually negotiate with someone who's good or bad, one of the most recognizable people on the planet right now, it's frightening to say that out loud, but Jake Paul is one of the most recognizable human beings on the planet. He's like a male version of a Kardashian is what he's become at this point. Yeah, it's good for business. Like it's good for business to try to sign this guy, but Jake Paul, to me, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing here if he's negotiating with them because, guys, he's got this very visible social media feud with Dana White. And so, he's throwing these pretty powerful jabs, at Dana White about fighter pay, and the two of these guys are arguing in public. So, yeah, like if Jake Paul wants to take the feud with Dana White to the next level, he's going to start negotiating with competitor organizations. But like from Jake Paul's point of view, it's like, he's pretty good at boxing, right? Like he's not world class, but he looks, when he's fighting people who aren't really professional boxers, he outclasses them and he's making millions of dollars doing it. I just think for him, it would be kind of stupid when you're a competent boxer to then, parlay that into a sport where you also have to worry about takedowns and knees and kicks and elbows and the 100 other disciplines that go into it. Because he would get completely exposed. Like he's become serviceable enough in boxing and he's making enough money doing it. Why even go fight MMA? And then from the standpoint of these promoters, like, you have to work out a weird deal with the guy because he's the one who's going to be bringing in most of the money when he fights. So he would get a different cut from all the other fighters. It just seems really complicated. And from his point of view, it seems pointless. He's got a good living going, doing what he's doing. I don't see why, James, this guy would actually step into a cage.
Yeah, your last point was one of my 2 points here, is that he's doing perfect doing what he's doing. He can ride this train, and the train is over as soon as he loses, by the way. So if he loses a fight, that takes the luster off, and he's not going to make tens of millions of dollars every time he steps in a boxing ring. So he needs to capitalize on each fight. Hopefully for him, he can fight 4 or 5 more fights, win 5 more fights. He'd make $100 million, doing that. And plus, PFL and Bellator can't afford him. He's making tens of millions of dollars in the boxing ring. I mean, how can PFL or Bellator?
Yeah, he would have to co-promote with them. I think like they can't like pay his salary. He would have to like be a promoter.
Yeah,
ownership. Yeah, he can't do it, guys. And here's why: the Jake Paul recipe for success is pick a sport and then fight guys in the sport you've chosen who don't actually compete in the sport you've chosen. So I would like to be a boxer, but I'm not fighting any boxers. What are you even saying?
Right.
If he joins Bellator, he has to fight another flipping MMA guy.
He would go to Bellator and then he would fight a boxer in
Oh,
Bellator.
okay. I mean, yeah, the whole recipe for his success doesn't involve actually facing people who compete in the sport in which he wants to compete. So, yeah, I don't know which one of you made it. I think it was James, but yeah, they can't afford him. I mean, it's ludicrous. At this point, Jake Paul's worth more than Bellator. I mean, maybe. I mean, or it's at least debatable, and certainly PFL. So. Yeah, I mean, it's just silly. He won't ever fight in the UFC either. He can make a lot of money picking off marginal strikers who've made names for themselves at some point or another in the UFC. A lot of money to be made doing that.
Yep.
I'm sorry. It's me again. I suck at this. Might have to move this over. Who's the most entertaining fighter in the UFC right now?
Oh man, if I'm going just based off of fighting purely, right? Not cutting promos and big main events. I might want to give some love to Sean O'Malley. Just like he's like a weird, he's unpredictable. Like and you guys know like the personality traits that I'm attracted to, like weirdos like the Diaz brothers. Sean O'Malley does his own podcast, and every time like he does video like we do, he does a YouTube thing with his brother. And I've watched it a few times, and every time I'm watching it, I'm like, I'm not nearly high enough to be watching this right now. Like you feel like you have to be like stoned out of your mind just to go through their vibe. And he's got this, really crowd pleasing, unpredictable striking style. So he's like really high up on my list right now. And I'm also a big fan of Stylebender, Israel Adesanya, which is a more obvious choice. I'm super entertained by his fighting style. Yuri Prochazka is someone I'm really into right now. Giga Chikadze, who's fighting this weekend. I love the Giga kick. But, man, I want to turn my answer into a Sean O'Malley appreciation segment because I love watching that dude scrap.
I'm going to surprise you with this answer. The key part is right now. And right now, I'd say Michael Chandler. Has he had a boring round this entire year? The Dan Hooker fight, 1 round, exciting. Charles Oliveira, 2 rounds, both exciting. Justin Gaethje, 3 rounds, all exciting. His entire year didn't have a boring round. I don't know if there's any fighter that you can name on the UFC roster who didn't have at least 1 down round or took a round off or got dominated or something like that. It was exciting. So I'd say right now, I would say Michael Chandler.
I got to tell you that for me, it's just easy because I'm so excited for a week from Saturday when we get to see Francis Ngannou return against Ciryl Gane in that matchup. Francis Ngannou harkens back to all the things I loved growing up as a kid about boxing. He brings all of that mystique and aura to this sport for me. So it hands down, I see Francis Ngannou walking towards the octagon cage and I am all in. I'm not taking a break to make a cocktail and I don't want to miss a second of what's about to happen. And so, he just brings that all. He is the total package when it comes to what I think is going to be the next like unimaginable pay-per-view monster for the UFC. But man, he's got to win on the 22nd first.
And he better not leave the UFC either.
Yeah. Well, no one else can afford him either. That's something that, we neglected to mention, but, that no one can pay him.
He would have to box.
The UFC could pay him. Right.
He would have to box. He would, because they're talking about he and Tyson Fury. But again, like, I'm not really interested. Like, I know he's a heavy puncher, but he's an MMA fighter. Like, he doesn't have a chance to beat Tyson Fury. I'm sorry. Like, that fight is a waste of time for me. So I hope he stays in MMA.
You just need to watch his knockout of Stipe. You can see how bad his striking defense is.
Right.
He was off balance, completely exposed, actually got cracked by Stipe, but just Stipe didn't catch him, in the right spot. I mean, it's just, he's an MMA brawler is what he is, but he's a terrifying specimen. Oh my God.
You're right. And I thought that's a good shout. I thought James had a good shout with Michael Chandler, and that reminded me Justin Gaethje is another one that's very high on the list.
Yeah, you always get to you overthink these things sometimes. You got to come up with that.
And our guy Alex M overthinks it too. Patty Pimblett. He's incredibly entertaining to watch, and he's got like the only thing that drives me crazy, and I know it's ridiculous for a bald man to say this, but his haircut drives me insane. Like he's got this Paul McCartney 1965 bowl cut. He's from maybe he's paying homage to the Beatles because he's from Liverpool, but it's like, bro, you look ridiculous. Like, get a haircut that's within 50 years. Like, what are you doing, man? But I guess that's part of his vibe. I guess I don't know.
Yeah,
Patty the Batty Pimblett.
I only had 3 toss-ups tonight, guys.
No, that's all we had tonight. Did you guys see this story? Thankfully, nobody was hurt. But a pub that Conor McGregor owns in Dublin, it was attacked by Molotov cocktails that some bros on a Vespa scooter like roll by McGregor's pub. It's an upscale Irish pub. The name of it is somewhere here in the story. The Black Forge Inn is what it's called. And, some dudes like roll up there in a Vespa and throw Molotov cocktails. I don't know if their intention was just to make a scene and scare people, but it doesn't sound like their attack was very successful, thankfully, because no one was injured and there was no damage to the pub. They didn't even have to close down. But this is a wild thing, man. I mean, you think about, I'm enjoying my day in Dublin and, people are setting off explosives. Like, that's a scary thing. I'm glad nothing bad came out of this, Frank.
I am too. It's the first I've heard of it, but I just think about all those fights that Conor picked with. What was the one where he actually started with organized crime in Ireland? Do you remember that episode?
Yeah, supposedly he punched a gentleman that was the father of like a big time figure in the Irish mob. And this is look. I don't know what's true and what's legend. Like, I'm sure there was something real happened to create the story. But as the story goes, McGregor punched out some guy who turned out to be the father of like an Irish mob boss. And then there were all these rumors that like Conor had to leave the country and like he couldn't go back until they settled this feud. Like there was a hit out for him. Probably a lot of that's bullshit. But yeah, that was the way the story went.
Yeah, so I mean, for a guy who just professionally runs his mouth all the time, it's not surprising that he may have picked a fight with, some lunatics that were as crazy enough to do something like that. So anyway, I'm not surprised. Like, I'm not surprised. I don't you just feel like this is like going to end badly?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. It makes me sad, but I don't see this fizzling out. I see this more like a supernova. Something really big and unfortunate is going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know if this example means anything, but it is like you have to wonder if, when Conor gets a little older, because he's probably early 30s, like, at some point he's going to get a little older. Maybe his fighting career is behind him. Maybe he'll just calm down because, I mean, Frank, you can probably speak on this even better than I can. Because I was a kid when all this stuff was going down, but there was probably a time in the 80s where we all thought there's no way Mike Tyson makes it to 40, that this guy is either going to be life in prison or he's going to kill himself. And like Mike Tyson is in like, I don't know, his late 50s now. And he seems to have completely mellowed out. Like Mike Tyson's like a Teddy, like people don't remember when this guy was just a scary individual. Like if in like the early 90s, if I had run into Tyson on the street, I would have like run the other way. What is this guy going to do? Now the guy's lovable. Like you want to hug him. Like, so maybe something like that will happen for Conor.
But the Mike Tyson story is amazing, but it's also just dumb luck. I mean, you know what I mean? Like he put himself in every possible position for something really, really bad to happen to him. And he just got lucky. And he says so as much in his book. And by the way, anyone who's listening, if you haven't read Mike Tyson's book, forget the stand-up routine. Barely any material on that.
I've watched the stand-up routine.
Read that book.
I don't read.
Read that book. You got to read the book. Oh my God, it's so good. You were done. When you put it down and you were just overwhelmed, both in amazement that anyone could live a life like that, and also just kind of full of admiration for his courage and finding his way through it all. Because it's like, holy cow.
Yeah, and even though Mike Tyson was always a buzzsaw coming up, he had certain qualities back then where he studied philosophy, he studied history and the Greek Romans and how they conquered and stuff like that. Like he had certain qualities that you can tell if he focused on those things later in life, that it would probably help him be a more well-rounded person. I don't see that in Conor. I just kind of see Conor as just kind of narrow-minded, egotistical, all about him, not really worrying about, the world around him or anyone around him, just in general, to where it's harder for me to see him kind of make that switch. So I don't know if that's a fair comparison. I just don't see that in his future.
Yeah. That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Like who knows? Maybe there's this whole other side to Conor that we just don't know. But you're right. Everything that we see, the persona that he displays in the public, it's just, this guy just thinks about money, fighting, whiskey. That's about it. That's about it. So part of, and we started the episode, of course, and spent the bulk of the episode talking about the recently booked fight. It's going to headline UFC 272, the pay-per-view in March, between Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal, a grudge match that you could argue is years in the making. And I'm really excited we're finally going to get it. Now, the reason why that's going to be on relatively short notice, headlining UFC 272, is that, you lost the main event because of a Max Holloway injury between Holloway and Volkanovski. And then you also had scheduled on that fight card, and they pushed it back a month. You were going to have the rematch between champion Aljamain Sterling and Piotr Jan, who he took the belt from on disqualification a while back. And they decided to move that fight back a month to 273 and replace it with Masvidal Covington as the main event of 272. And Jan and Sterling, Frank, have been arguing about like why the fight was pushed back. A lot of banter between these two guys. Aljamain Sterling, and if this is untrue, this is not a very nice thing to say in 2022, because a lot of people take this stuff very personally. So Aljamain Sterling,
everybody takes everything personally in 2022,
but especially pandemic related stuff, right? So
yeah.
Aljamain Sterling has accused Piotr Jan of not being able to fight on that date because he's unvaccinated and like lying about it. So they had to push back the fight because he's unvaccinated. Whereas Jan says, no, I am vaccinated. The reason why they're pushing the fight back is they don't want your bum ass headlining a main event. So they pushed it back. Because remember, the way the UFC does it, they respect the title fight. So if you kept that fight on the same card with Covington and Masvidal, even though Covington Masvidal is the more sellable fight, the UFC still feels obligated to put the title fight as the main event. So I believe Jan's side of the story, actually. I do believe the reason why they moved that fight back a month was they didn't want to feel forced to make that the headliner when you can have Masvidal and Covington on the top of the poster. Because if you were going to do that pay-per-view where it was Jan Sterling headlining above Masvidal Covington, that wouldn't really make sense. But the UFC always has to have the title fight on top of a non-title fight.
Plus, you got. Go ahead. I was gonna say. Plus, you got to think of the economics of it. The pay-per-view points. Are you gonna give Masvidal, Covington, Jan, and Sterling pay-per-view points? I mean, that's a lot. So I think that makes sense for them to move it off. And I think Jan is correct. I mean, Aljamain Sterling isn't really a pay-per-view seller, per se. You can't really sell him as a headliner, even though he's a pretty good fighter. But if we're going to predict the fight, I think Jan wins the fight not pretty easily, but fairly convincingly.
I mean, you're right, James, but Jan's a tremendous talent. He's not a pay-per-view needle mover either,
Yeah.
So I mean, they're stuck in that same trap that fighters below a certain level have been stuck in forever, no matter how hard the UFC works at it. Nobody just cares nearly as much as they do about the bigger guys. So it's a shame, but in this particular instance, are we really? I mean, like Aljamain Sterling, bro, dodge this fight as long as you can. If you're within the sound of my voice, don't do it, man.
Yeah, you're probably not going to get bailed out by a DQ a second time.
Jan's going to kill you, bro. So Aljamain Sterling is the nicest guy in the world. And what Jan's going to do to him, it puts fear in my heart.
So, guys, last thing I want to get into before we wrap up this episode, we do have fights this weekend. It's been 3 weeks without fights. Like the UFC, this is an uncharacteristically long drought because typically they hit us with something every single week. We've gotten some time off over the holiday season. I really like the main event this Saturday, UFC on ESPN 32. Giga Chikadze, the master of the Giga kick, takes on Calvin Kattar in a big-time featherweight fight. And, whoever comes out victorious here, could be, fast-tracked for a featherweight title shot, maybe as soon as in a couple months from now. All right. So I favor Giga in this fight, but this is like a really good measuring stick for him. And Giga Chikadze, he's on an insane run. 9-0 run, including 7-0 in the UFC. I watched this guy in Glory Kickboxing, and what's amazing to me is a lot of times you'll take a kickboxer out of the ring and put him in the octagon, and they can't really translate their kickboxing style. I've seen it happen so many times over the years. You try to convert, a K1 guy in the old days, a Glory kickboxer, and then you're like, oh, this is great. They can use their kickboxing in the octagon, but it doesn't usually work that way. Giga Chikadze has been able to seamlessly transition. And part of what is amazing about this guy is he's terrifying. He's able to use kicks and knees as takedown defense. He has this technique. He's used it a couple times in the octagon up against wrestlers. You shoot for a takedown on him, and he's able to time a knee perfectly, whereas you're dropping your level to take him down, you catch a knee to the chest or to the face, and it's like the violent equivalent of a sprawl. Like, it's like having a great sprawl where instead of underhooking or sprawling, you're just kneeing a guy in the face. He times it so perfectly. So I hope I'm not, pumping too much hot air into Chikadze, because like this is the type of fight where, Cater can give anybody problems. He's a really tough out. So I don't know if Chikadze is going to finish him within 5 rounds, though he probably will. He loves throwing that left kick to the liver. He can throw head kicks from unpredictable angles. So I think that this is a great opportunity for Giga Chikadze to show like a really big audience. Hopefully a lot of us watch on ESPN, show a really big audience what he can do. I think he comes out victorious here. What do you think, James?
Yeah, very, very well said, especially on Giga's side. I'm actually watching for Cater on this because I'm curious how he responds after getting embarrassed by Max Holloway. I mean, Max Holloway just put on a clinic, surprised everybody. I mean, as good as Max Holloway is, no one expected him to just make it look that easy. And really, I mean, Holloway was talking to people outside the octagon. I'm the best boxer in the UFC, while he was tagging him at the same time. He just really embarrassed him. So I'm sure there's a lot of pride at stake. I'm sure Cater knows that he's a better fighter than that, and has a great chance to show it against a good fighter. So I'm more curious. I mean, I know how good Giga is. I'm more curious how Cater responds after that kind of loss to Max Holloway. Does he go down in the toilet and just not the same fighter anymore, or does he pick himself up? He lost to a very good fighter, probably a former and once again champion probably soon, and responds and picks up a good win.
Great analysis from both you guys. I mean, what the hell am I supposed to add? I mean, normally
I'll let you go first next time.
Yeah, usually you guys leave me some angle, but I mean, I'm not gonna torture the public by repeating both things you guys just said.
Yeah. So
can't we just fast forward to next Saturday already?
Oh, I would love that. I would love, like, if they could just, because I want to watch Giga. So if they could take this fight like off of an ESPN main event and like throw this on the pay-per-view main card for the following week, then yeah, I would absolutely love that. So yeah, I had a lot of fun today, and yeah, guys, I encourage everyone watching us, whether you're watching live or you're watching a replay later, do us a solid, smash the like button. Hit that like button, because the more likes we get, the more people are going to see this video and see what we're doing here every week on 5 Rounds. So please smash the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to 5 Reasons Sports, because you're getting content on everything: NBA, NFL, NHL, international soccer, combat sports. You get it all here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And keep your eyes out for content, because we're going to make this happen. Frank Zaffere he's become an organ donor. Like, he's putting his body on the line here. We're going to be like auctioning off parts of Frank's body after he gets just destroyed in training. We're going to be putting out.
Love that support, bro.
I hope you are an organ donor. Like, I hope your liver or your kidneys go to good use here. So yeah, so within the next we're going to get together with Dean Thomas soon and organize it. But yeah, within the next couple of months, we're going to get Frank in the gym and get him ready for some kind of an exhibition fight. So that's going to be really good. If anyone has anything to promote, James, Frank, you guys have anything going on, even if it's where to follow you on, I'll let James promote his Twitter, and then I'll promote Frank's Twitter for him, because he doesn't like to do it. Go ahead, James.
Yep, James Walker NFL. I've seen some new followers over the past few weeks that are of the MMA community, so I think this is making a good difference. So So yeah, follow me there, and that's all I got. That's all I got for you this week.
Frank, you want to promote?
I'm coming, bro. This could be a big year, 2022. I'm going to win my fight, and then I'm going to get a grill deal like George Foreman because he did it in his 50s. That's going to be my ticket, baby. But seriously, guys, great show. Let's make sure we're communicating over the next couple days. Let's get together in Palm Beach. I know a good spot. And with Dean Thomas, let's break bread. Let's make it happen.
I love it. Make sure you guys follow Frank on Twitter at realfrank_Z. You still in the 40s? How's the follower count? Do you know? You can't log in?
I'm older than my follower count. Like I think my follower count is in the mid 40s, and I am unfortunately 51. Yeah.
All right. Well, you'll catch up to that soon. And also, just a couple weeks ago, we created a show Twitter account. It's a great way to keep yourselves up to date with what we're doing here and with some of the news in the MMA world. So yeah, follow us on Twitter. Let's build the community. We're new to this. We've all had our personal accounts, but the show account is relatively new. So follow us at 5_MMA. That's the word 5, FIVE_MMA. And we can all interact together. So huge shout out to Dean Thomas, who is gracious enough to join us 2 weeks in a row now. I had to steal Dean's time 2 weeks in a row. So we'll give him a couple of weeks off. Let him rest up for Frank's training sessions coming up. We will talk to you guys again next time on another episode of 5 Rounds on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.